The leather-bound diary tumbled across the dusty Montana trail like tumbleweed in August, pages flapping wildly in the hot wind until it came to rest against Lucas Reed's worn boot, open to a single page that would change the course of his entire life. Lucas had been riding hard from Billings to Helena, Montana, his horse tired and his own spirits lower than they'd been in months. The year was 1883, and he'd just buried his father after a short illness that had taken the old rancher too soon. At 26 years old, Lucas found himself the sole owner of a struggling cattle ranch and a debt that seemed to grow larger with each passing week. He'd been riding to Helena to meet with the bank, to beg for more time, when the diary appeared like a message from Providence itself. He dismounted slowly, his leather chaps creaking as he bent to retrieve the small book. The cover was dusty but well made, clearly belonging to someone with at least modest means. Lucas knew he should simply leave it, perhaps drop it at the sheriff's office in Helena, but something made him glance down at the open page. The handwriting was feminine, delicate but strong, each letter formed with careful precision. June 14, 1883. Father says we leave for California tomorrow. I cannot bear it. To leave Montana, to leave everything I've ever known, feels like dying a slow death. He doesn't understand that I don't want parlors and tea parties and simpering suitors who care only for his railroad money. I want mountains and honest work and a life that means something. I want to matter, not just to exist as an ornament in someone's carefully constructed world. But daughters don't get choices, do they? We get obligations and expectations and futures written by other hands. Still, I dream. I dream of staying, of finding my own path, of someone who might see me as more than just Charles Zimmerman's daughter. Foolish, perhaps, but aren't all dreams foolish until they come true? Lucas read the passage 3 times, his calloused fingers careful not to smudge the ink. The date was from just over a week ago. Charles Zimmerman. The name rang familiar, though Lucas couldn't quite place it. He closed the diary gently and looked around the trail. There were wagon tracks heading west, already being obscured by the constant Montana wind. Someone had been traveling this route recently, probably the very wagon that had lost this precious book. He should keep riding to Helena. His meeting was important. The bank wouldn't wait forever. But something in those words, in the raw honesty and quiet desperation of that single page, grabbed hold of his heart and wouldn't let go. Lucas had always been practical, sensible, the kind of man who did what needed doing without complaint or drama. Yet standing there on that dusty trail with the sun beating down and his horse snorting impatiently, he made a decision that defied all logic. He was going to find her. Lucas tucked the diary carefully into his saddlebag and swung back onto his horse. The wagon tracks led west, toward the territories and eventually California. If she'd written that entry on June 14th and left the next day, she had about 8 days' head start. A wagon moved slowly, though. A man on horseback, traveling light and fast, could make up that time. He rode into Helena, just as the sun began its descent behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded him of why he loved this land so fiercely. Helena was booming, swollen with fortune seekers and railroad men, its streets crowded even at this late hour. Lucas headed straight for the claims office, where public records might tell him more about Charles Zimmerman. The clerk was a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers who looked annoyed at being bothered so close to closing time. Zimmerman? Sure, I know the name. Railroad man bought up half the mineral rights in the territory before selling them for a fortune. Word is he headed to California, Sacramento way, going to invest in the Southern Pacific or some such. Why? Just curious, Lucas said, flipping the man a coin. He traveled by wagon. Big wagon train, actually. Joined up with the Morrison party, about 30 wagons total. They're taking the northern route through Idaho. Left maybe 8, 9 days ago. Lucas thanked him and left, his mind already calculating distances and speeds. The northern route through Idaho meant they'd likely stop at trading posts and settlements along the way. A large wagon train couldn't move quickly, not with families and household goods weighing them down. He had a chance, but first, he needed to deal with his own obligations. Lucas found a telegraph office still open and sent a message to his foreman back at the ranch, instructing him to handle things for the next few months. Then he sent another message to the bank, requesting to postpone their meeting. It would cost him, he knew. Interest would accumulate, and the bank might lose patience entirely. But the alternative, letting this mysterious woman disappear into California without ever knowing who she was, felt unbearable in a way he couldn't quite explain. Lucas spent the night in a cheap boarding house, the diary on the small table beside his bed. He told himself he shouldn't read more, that it was a violation of privacy, but curiosity won out. He lit the lamp and opened to the first page. January 1st, 1883. Mother always said a lady should keep a diary. This is my first attempt. I'm not sure what to write, except that I turned 18 today and the world feels both impossibly large and suffocatingly small. Father gave me a pearl necklace. I wanted a horse. Lucas smiled despite himself. He turned the page. The entries spanned 6 months, and though Lucas knew he should sleep, should preserve his strength for the journey ahead, he found himself reading deep into the night. Catherine Zimmerman emerged from the pages like a spirit taking form. She wrote about her mother's death 3 years earlier, about her father's increasing obsession with wealth and status, about feeling trapped in a life that didn't fit. She wrote about books she'd read, landscapes she'd seen, dreams she harbored. She was intelligent and funny, passionate and kind, frustrated and hopeful all at once. March 12, 1883. Saw a woman in town today, a rancher's wife, riding astride instead of side saddle, her face sun weathered and strong. Father was appalled. I was envious. She looked free in a way I've never been. April 22nd, 1883. Father announced today that we're moving to California. He says Montana is too rough, too uncivilized for a young lady of breeding. I wanted to scream that I don't want to be civilized, that I love the roughness, the honesty of this place. But I stayed silent, as always. Good daughters stay silent. May 30th, 1883. I'm teaching myself to shoot. Found Father's old pistol and practiced behind the barn. I'm terrible at it, but it makes me feel less helpless, less like a possession to be moved from place to place. Lucas closed the diary as dawn light began creeping through the thin curtains. He felt like he knew Catherine Zimmerman, felt connected to her struggles and dreams in a way that seemed impossible for someone he'd never met. She wanted freedom. She wanted purpose. She wanted to be seen as more than ornamental, and she was being dragged to California against her will. He packed quickly and headed to the general store as soon as it opened. Lucas bought supplies for a long journey, spending more than he should have on quality provisions. The storekeeper, a gregarious man named Pete, raised his eyebrows at the quantity. Planning an expedition, Lucas? Something like that, Lucas said, counting out bills. You know anything about the Morrison wagon train? Heard they left about a week back. Big group, well supplied, taking the northern route. Why you thinking of catching up? Maybe. Pete leaned across the counter, his expression curious. This about a woman? Lucas hesitated, then nodded. In a way. Well, hell. About time you showed interest in something other than cattle and fence posts. Your daddy, God rest him, would have approved. Lucas wasn't sure about that, but he appreciated the sentiment. He loaded his supplies onto his horse and set out west, following the wagon tracks that were still visible in places, already fading in others. The Montana landscape rolled past in shades of gold and green, mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. Lucas rode hard but steady, stopping only when necessary. At night, he'd make camp and read another entry or two from Catherine's diary, learning more about her with each page. He learned that her favorite color was blue, that she loved thunderstorms, that she'd once nursed an injured hawk back to health. He learned that she felt responsible for her father's happiness after her mother died, that she carried guilt for wanting her own life. June 3rd, 1883. Sometimes I think about just riding away, taking a horse and heading into the mountains, living free even if it means living rough. But I'm a coward. I'm too afraid of disappointing father, too afraid of the unknown, too afraid of everything. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Mother used to say. It's moving forward despite it. I wish I had more courage. 3 days into his journey, Lucas reached a trading post near the Idaho border. The proprietor, a grizzled man named Hank, confirmed that the Morrison train had passed through. "Big group," Hank said, spitting tobacco juice into a can. "Stayed 2 nights, restocked supplies. Nice folks, mostly. There was one man, though, Charles something. Railroad money, kept his daughter on a short leash, if you know what I mean. Pretty little thing, but she looked sad, real sad." Lucas's chest tightened. "They say where they were headed next." "Fort Hall, probably. That's the next major stop on the northern route." Fort Hall was still a week away for a wagon train, maybe 3 days hard riding for a single man. Lucas thanked Hank and pressed on. The terrain grew more rugged as he crossed into Idaho territory. The diary had become his constant companion, and though he felt guilty reading someone's private thoughts, he couldn't stop. Catherine's voice felt like a lifeline, like something he'd been searching for without knowing it. June 8th, 1883. Met a woman at the trading post today, a Shoshone woman selling beadwork. She had 3 children and laughed easily despite the hardship written in the lines of her face. I bought a bracelet from her, beautiful blue and white beads in a pattern like mountains. She told me, through gestures more than words, that mountains go on forever. I think she meant it as encouragement. I think she saw something in my face that told her I needed encouragement. Father made me put the bracelet away, said it wasn't appropriate. I'm wearing it anyway, hidden under my sleeve. Lucas pushed his horse harder than he should have, driven by an urgency he couldn't fully name. He camped under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, and he dreamed of a woman with sad eyes and hidden bracelets, a woman who wanted mountains and freedom. On the 6th day, he reached Fort Hall. The wagon train had left just that morning, the post commander told him. Lucas was getting close. His horse was exhausted, though, and he knew he'd need a fresh mount to continue at this pace. He traded his horse plus a significant sum for a strong roan gelding, feeling guilty for giving up his loyal companion, but knowing it was necessary. "They're heading to Boys next," the post commander said. "Though I heard there might be some trouble with the route, reports of bandit activity near the Snake River crossing." Lucas filed that information away and rode out within the hour. The diary had only a few unread pages left, and he savored them, reading just 1 entry each night. June 11th, 1883. We've been traveling for days, and everything looks the same. Dust and sky and more dust. Father barely speaks to me anymore, angry that I'm not more enthusiastic about our grand new future. I tried to tell him I'm scared, that I don't know how to be the person he wants me to be, but he just patted my hand and said I'd adjust. I don't want to adjust. I want to live. 2 days from Fort Hall, Lucas spotted the wagon train in the distance. His heart hammered in his chest as he approached slowly, trying to look casual rather than like a man who'd ridden hundreds of miles to find a woman he'd never met. The train had stopped for the midday rest. Wagons circled in a defensive position, people moving about in the organized chaos of a traveling community. Lucas rode up slowly, his hand raised in greeting. A man who was clearly the wagon master approached, rifle held loosely but ready. "Help you, stranger. Name's Lucas Reed," he said. "I'm looking for the Zimmerman wagon, found something that belongs to them." The wagon master studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward a large, well-maintained wagon near the center of the circle. "Over there." "But Mr. Zimmerman doesn't take kindly to strangers." Lucas thanked him and dismounted, leading his horse toward the indicated wagon. His mouth was dry, his heart racing. What was he going to say? How could he explain tracking them across 2 territories because of a diary? A man emerged from the wagon as Lucas approached. Charles Zimmerman was tall and distinguished, with silver-streaked hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to wealth and respect. His eyes were cold as they assessed Lucas. "Mr. Zimmerman," Lucas said, removing his hat. "My name is Lucas Reed. I found something on the trail near Helena that I believe belongs to you, or rather, to your daughter." Zimmerman's eyes narrowed. "What kind of something?" Before Lucas could answer, a woman appeared in the wagon entrance and his breath caught in his throat. Catherine Zimmerman was beautiful, but not in the delicate, fragile way he'd somehow expected. She was sun-touched and strong-featured, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes the color of a Montana sky just before a storm. Those eyes widened as she looked at him, curious and cautious at once. "Catherine," her father said sharply, "inside." But she didn't move. "What did you find?" she asked Lucas directly, her voice clear and melodic. Lucas pulled the diary from his saddlebag. Recognition flashed across Catherine's face, followed by something that looked like panic. "My diary," she breathed. "I thought I'd lost it days ago." She reached for it, but her father intercepted, snatching it from Lucas's hand. "Thank you for returning my daughter's property," Zimmerman said coldly. "You can go now." "Father, please," Catherine said, climbing down from the wagon despite his glare. "Let me at least thank him properly." Up close, Lucas could see the intelligence in her eyes, the quiet strength he'd sensed in her writing. She looked tired, he thought, and sad, just as Hank had described. "Thank you," she said to Lucas. "Truly. I was heartbroken when I realized it was gone." "I only read 1 page," Lucas lied. "The one it was open to when I found it. But that page made me think you might want it back fairly urgently." Understanding flickered in her eyes. She knew which page, he realized. The one about leaving Montana, about not wanting to go to California. Heat rose in her cheeks. "Well, you've returned it," Zimmerman said, stepping between them. "You'll understand if we don't invite you to stay. We have a schedule to keep." "Actually," Lucas said, thinking fast, "I was hoping to join your train. I'm heading west myself, and there's safety in numbers with all the bandit reports." It wasn't exactly a lie. He was heading west now, following her, and there had been reports of bandits. The wagon master, who'd been listening nearby, spoke up. "We can always use another able-bodied man, particularly one who looks like he can handle himself." Zimmerman looked furious, but he couldn't object without seeming unreasonable. "Fine," he bit out. "But stay away from my daughter." Lucas nodded, but his eyes were on Catherine, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe. Hope, possibly. Or perhaps he was just seeing what he wanted to see. The wagon train moved out an hour later, and Lucas rode near the back, trying not to seem too obvious in his interest. But his eyes kept drifting to the Zimmerman wagon, to occasional glimpses of Catherine as she walked beside it, or sat on the bench next to her father. That night, when they made camp, Lucas helped with the heavy work of circling wagons and tending livestock. The other travelers were friendly enough, families and fortune seekers and couples starting fresh. They welcomed him easily, several people thanking him for adding another gun to their defensive capabilities. Lucas made his camp a respectful distance from the Zimmerman wagon, but close enough to watch over it. He'd read enough of Catherine's diary to know her father was controlling, protective to the point of suffocation. Lucas wanted her to know someone was there, someone who understood what she'd written, what she wanted. He was checking his horse when a voice spoke softly behind him. "You read more than one page." Lucas turned to find Catherine standing a few feet away, arms crossed, expression challenging but not hostile. Up close in the firelight, she was even more striking, her eyes reflecting the flames. "I did," he admitted. "I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help myself." "Why?" "Because after reading that first page, I needed to know more. Needed to know who could write something so honest, so real. And then I kept reading and I couldn't stop, and I know that doesn't excuse the invasion of your privacy, but it's the truth." Catherine stared at him for a long moment. "You rode all this way to return a diary." "No," Lucas said honestly. "I rode all this way to find you," her breath caught. "You don't even know me. I know you want to stay in Montana. I know you taught yourself to shoot with your father's old pistol. I know you nursed an injured hawk and love thunderstorms and feel trapped in a life that doesn't fit. I know you're brave even though you think you're a coward, and I know that you deserve better than being dragged to California against your will." Catherine's eyes were wide, shining with unshed tears. "I should be angry that you read my private thoughts. You should. But instead I'm relieved. Someone finally sees me." Her voice broke on the last word. "Someone finally understands." Lucas took a step closer, close enough to see the freckles scattered across her nose, close enough to smell sage and soap. "I see you, Catherine Zimmerman, and I think you're extraordinary." "Catherine!" Her father's voice rang out across the camp. "Get away from that man." She flinched but didn't move immediately. "I have to go. Father will make a scene." "Will you talk to me again tomorrow?" "I'll try." She hesitated, then added softly, "Lucas Reed, that's your name." "It is." "You're a rancher near Helena." "I am, or I was. The ranch is struggling, and I left it to chase a woman I'd never met halfway across 2 territories. So maybe I'm not the most sensible man you could have encountered." A smile tugged at her lips, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Maybe sensible is overrated. Catherine." Zimmerman was approaching now, his face thunderous. She turned and hurried back to her wagon, but not before glancing over her shoulder once, her expression a mix of fear and hope that made Lucas's heart ache. The next week passed in a strange dance. Lucas rode with the wagon train, helped with the work, and gradually earned the trust and friendship of the other travelers. But every moment, he was aware of Catherine. She walked beside her father's wagon during the day, helped prepare meals, performed the 100 small tasks that kept a traveling household functioning. And whenever possible, she'd glance his way, their eyes meeting across the distance her father enforced between them. Zimmerman watched Lucas like a hawk, making sure they never had a moment alone, but he couldn't control everything. Lucas began leaving notes, tucked into places he knew Catherine would find them, under a rock near where she fetched water, folded into the laundry she hung to dry. Brief messages that he hoped conveyed what he felt. "You deserve mountains and freedom. Your courage shows in 1,000 small ways. I'm here. I'm not leaving." He never signed them, but she knew they were from him. He could tell by the way she'd smile softly when she found them, by the way she'd look for him afterward. 2 weeks into the journey, the wagon train reached a wide river crossing. The water was running high from spring melt, dangerous and fast. The wagon master called a halt to assess the situation and plan the safest crossing strategy. Lucas was helping reinforce wagon wheels when he heard the commotion. A child had wandered too close to the river and fallen in, swept away by the current. Without thinking, Lucas dropped his tools and ran, diving into the icy water. The current was stronger than he'd expected, pulling him downstream even as he swam hard toward the struggling child. His clothes weighed him down, his boots filling with water, but he pushed forward until he could grab the boy's shirt. The child, maybe 6 years old, clung to him desperately. Getting back to shore was harder than reaching the child had been. Lucas's muscles screamed with effort, his lungs burning as he fought the current. He could hear shouting from the bank but couldn't make out words over the roar of water. His fingers found purchase on a partially submerged log, and he used it to pull them closer to shore, inch by painful inch. Hands reached out as they neared the bank, pulling first the child and then Lucas onto solid ground. Lucas collapsed onto the mud, coughing up river water, his body shaking with cold and exhaustion. "You saved my son." A woman was crying, holding the child close. "You saved him." Lucas just nodded, too spent to speak. Someone draped a blanket over his shoulders. Someone else pressed a flask of whiskey into his hands. And then Catherine was there, kneeling beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Her father tried to pull her back, but she shook him off with surprising force. "Are you all right?" she asked urgently, her eyes searching his face. "Cold," Lucas managed through chattering teeth, "but all right. You could have drowned. That was incredibly reckless. He's a child." I know." She looked like she wanted to say more, but her father finally succeeded in pulling her away. That night, the wagon train made camp early, everyone subdued by the near tragedy. The child's parents couldn't stop thanking Lucas, offering him food and supplies he didn't need. He accepted graciously, understanding their need to express gratitude. As darkness fell, Lucas sat by his fire, still chilled despite dry clothes and hot coffee. He heard footsteps and looked up to find Catherine approaching, carrying a bundle. "My father is asleep," she said quietly. "I put laudanum in his evening tea, not enough to hurt him, just enough to ensure he won't wake for several hours." Lucas stood quickly. "Catherine, you didn't have to do that." "I did. I needed to talk to you properly without him hovering." She handed him the bundle, which turned out to be a thick quilt. "And you're still shivering." He wrapped the quilt around his shoulders, and they sat together by the fire. For a long moment neither spoke, just sat in comfortable silence under stars that seemed to understand what was growing between them. "You were very brave today," Catherine said finally. "I was very wet," Lucas countered, making her laugh. "That too." She sobered, looking at him seriously. "Why are you really here, Lucas? And please don't just say to return my diary." "All right. The truth." He took a breath. "I read your words and I felt like I'd been waiting my whole life to meet the person who wrote them. I felt like I knew you, like I understood you, and like maybe you might understand me too. I've spent my whole life doing what was expected, running a ranch I inherited, being responsible and practical and careful. And then I found your diary and something in me just broke loose. I thought, what if I could be brave? What if I could do something completely impractical and maybe even foolish? What if I could help someone else be free, even if I couldn't quite manage it for myself?" Catherine's eyes were bright with tears. "You left your ranch, your obligations." "I did." "For me, for someone you'd never met." "I know how it sounds." "It sounds wonderful," she whispered. "It sounds like something from a novel. It sounds impossible and perfect and terrifying." "Which part terrifies you?" The part where I'm falling in love with you and we've barely spoken a dozen words to each other. The part where my father will never approve. The part where I don't know how this could possibly work. Lucas's heart was hammering so hard he was sure she could hear it. You're falling in love with me, she laughed shakily. I've been falling since you said you saw me, since you proved that someone actually listened to my words, my thoughts. Do you know how invisible I've felt my whole life? Like I'm just a shadow, a reflection of what my father wants me to be. And then you appeared and suddenly I felt real. You are real, Lucas said fiercely. You're the most real thing I've ever encountered. He reached for her hand and she let him take it, her fingers small and warm in his. They sat like that for a long time, just holding hands and watching the fire, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Tell me about your ranch, Catherine said eventually. So Lucas did. He told her about the land his grandfather had claimed, about the house his father had built, about the cattle and the endless work and the beauty of Montana that made the hardship worthwhile. He told her about the debt and the struggles, about his worry that he might lose everything his family had worked for. You love it? Catherine asked. The ranch, I mean. I do. It's hard and frustrating and sometimes I want to walk away, but yes, I love it. It's home. I've never really had a home, she said softly. We moved around when I was young, following my father's business interests, and nowhere ever felt permanent, like we were just passing through. I envied people with roots, with places that knew their names. You could have that. In Montana. Catherine smiled sadly. My father has plans. A house in Sacramento, an introduction to society, eventually a suitable marriage to someone with the right connections. He's trying to give me what he thinks I need. But it's not what you want. No. I want dirt under my fingernails and mountains on the horizon. I want to matter, to contribute something real to the world. I want to choose my own life. She looked at him intently. I want you. The words hung in the air between them, brave and vulnerable and perfect. Then choose me, Lucas said. Choose yourself, stay. How? My father will never agree. You're 18. Legally, you can make your own choices. Legally, perhaps, but morally, he's my father. He's alone except for me. I'm all he has left of my mother. Lucas understood that burden, that guilt. You can't live your life for someone else, Catherine. Not even someone you love, says the man who left his struggling ranch to chase a woman across 2 territories. That's different. The ranch will survive or it won't. But letting you disappear without trying, I couldn't have survived that. Catherine was quiet for a long time, her thumb tracing small circles on the back of his hand. What are you suggesting? That I just abandon him, get off at the next stop and refuse to continue? I'm suggesting you tell him the truth. That you're unhappy, that you want a different life, that you're old enough to make your own decisions. And yes, if necessary, that you're prepared to leave. He'll be furious, probably. He might disown me. That's his choice. I'd have nothing. No money, no prospects. You'd have yourself, Lucas said. And if you wanted, you'd have me. A struggling rancher with more debt than sense, but someone who sees you, who values you for who you actually are. Catherine turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his in the firelight. This is crazy. We barely know each other. I know. But sometimes crazy is exactly right. She leaned forward, and Lucas met her halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff all at once. It was gentle and searching, full of promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I'm terrified, Catherine whispered. Me too. But I want this. I want you. Then we'll figure it out together. They talked until the fire burned low, sharing stories and dreams, learning each other in the way that lovers do. Catherine told him about her mother, about her childhood dreams of being a teacher or a writer, about the loneliness of living up to expectations. Lucas told her about losing his own mother young, about the weight of inheritance, about his hopes for the ranch despite its struggles. As dawn approached, Catherine reluctantly stood to leave. "I should get back before Father wakes. Will you tell him about us?" "Yes, not today, but soon. I need to find the right moment, the right words. I'll be here whenever you're ready." She kissed him once more, quick and sweet, then disappeared into the pre-dawn shadows. The opportunity came 3 days later when the wagon train stopped at a small settlement to resupply. Zimmerman was in town conducting business, and Catherine found Lucas near the corrals. "I'm going to tell him tonight," she said without preamble. "After dinner when he's relaxed. Do you want me there?" "No, this is something I need to do alone. But afterward, whatever happens, I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing you. I'm staying." Lucas pulled her close, holding her tight. "You're so brave." "I'm absolutely terrified. Bravery isn't the absence of fear." She pulled back, smiling through tears. "My mother used to say that, smart woman." That evening, Lucas tried to stay busy, but his mind was on Catherine and the confrontation he knew was happening. He was checking his gear for the 10th time when he heard shouting from the Zimmerman wagon. The words were indistinct, but the anger was unmistakable. Other travelers looked concerned, but no one intervened. Family disputes were private matters, even in the close quarters of a wagon train. The shouting continued for what felt like hours. Lucas forced himself to stay put, to give Catherine the space to handle this herself. But every fiber of his being wanted to rush over there and shield her from her father's anger. Finally, as full dark settled over the camp, Catherine emerged from the wagon. Even from a distance, Lucas could see she'd been crying. She walked directly to him, her head held high despite the tears streaming down her face. He said, "If I choose you, I'm no longer his daughter. No money, no inheritance, no family. He said he'd rather have no child than a disobedient one." Lucas felt rage course through him at Zimmerman's cruelty, but Catherine wasn't finished. "And I told him that I was sorry he felt that way, but I wasn't changing my mind. I told him I loved him, but I loved myself more, and that meant choosing a life that actually fit who I am." She looked up at Lucas, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "I told him I was staying in Montana with you." Lucas pulled her into his arms, holding her as she shook with the force of her emotions. Around them, the camp had grown quiet, everyone aware that something significant was happening. "You're sure?" Lucas asked softly. "There's no going back from this, I'm sure. I'm terrified and heartbroken and sure. You won't regret it. I promise you won't regret it." The wagon master approached cautiously. "Everything all right here?" "Miss Zimmerman will be staying when the train moves on," Lucas said. "We'll be heading back to Montana." The older man nodded. "Figured something like that might happen. You folks need anything, a witness for a wedding, if you can spare the time tomorrow morning." Catherine pulled back, staring at Lucas in shock. "What? Marry me," Lucas said. "Right now, tomorrow, I don't care when, but marry me, Catherine. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice. You don't have to marry me just to make things proper. I'm not. I'm asking because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone who understands what I feel, who wants what I want, who sees the world the way I do. I'm asking because I love you." "You love me," she repeated wonderingly. "Completely?" "Absolutely, without reservation." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling now. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you," the wagon master grinned. "Well, all right then. I'm ordained, can perform the ceremony myself, tomorrow morning before the train pulls out." True to his word, the wagon master performed a simple but heartfelt ceremony the next morning. Catherine wore her traveling dress, and Lucas wore his cleanest shirt. They had no rings, but they had each other, and they had a handful of witnesses who cheered when the wagon master pronounced them married. Zimmerman didn't attend. He stayed in his wagon, silent and unmoved, as his daughter married a man she'd known for less than a month. Catherine tried one last time to speak with him before the wagon train departed, but he wouldn't open the door. She stood outside the wagon, tears streaming down her face, saying goodbye to a father who refused to hear her. "I love you," she called through the closed door. "I'll always love you. And if you ever change your mind, if you ever want to know me again, I'll be in Helena, at the Reed Ranch. I'll be there, and I'll be waiting." There was no response. Lucas stood beside his new wife as the wagon train pulled out, rolling west toward a future that no longer included her. Catherine cried quietly, grieving the relationship she'd lost even as she embraced the freedom she'd gained. "You all right?" Lucas asked softly. "No, but I will be." They stayed in the settlement for 2 days, giving Catherine time to process everything that had happened. Lucas used the time to purchase basic supplies for their return journey and to send a telegram to his foreman, letting him know he was coming home with a wife. On the 3rd day, they began the long journey back to Montana. They traveled slowly, in no particular hurry, stopping to camp in beautiful places and getting to know each other as husband and wife. The physical intimacy between them grew naturally, tenderly, both of them learning what brought the other pleasure. One night, camped beside a clear stream with mountains rising purple in the distance, Catherine sat beside the fire and smiled. "What?" Lucas asked, watching her expression. "I'm happy," she said wonderingly. "Despite everything, despite losing my father and having no idea what comes next, I'm happy." "Good, you deserve to be happy. So do you." She moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "Tell me honestly, Lucas, what are we riding back to? How bad is the ranch situation?" He'd been avoiding this conversation, not wanting to burden her with his worries, but she deserved the truth. "It's bad. The debt is significant and I'm behind on payments. The bank might foreclose. I've got a good foreman and loyal workers, but without capital, we can't expand or even properly maintain what we have." "How much debt?" He told her the number, watching her face for dismay. Instead, she looked thoughtful. "My mother left me a small trust fund. Not a fortune, but enough. Father controlled it until I turned 18, but legally it's mine now." "Catherine, no. I didn't marry you for money. I know that. But we're married now, which means what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. If I have resources that could help save your family's ranch, why wouldn't I use them? Because you might need that money. For yourself, for our future." "The ranch is our future," she said firmly. "Lucas, I meant what I said in my diary. I want to contribute something real to matter. Let me help. Let me be a true partner in this." He studied her face, seeing the determination there, the genuine desire to be involved. "You're sure?" "Completely." They reached Helena on a warm afternoon in late July. The town looked the same as when Lucas had left, but he felt completely different. He wasn't the desperate, grieving man who'd ridden out chasing a dream. He was a husband now, a man with purpose and hope. The ranch was a 2-hour ride from town, through rolling grasslands that turned golden in the summer sun. As they crested the final hill, Lucas pointed to the valley below. "There. That's home." Catherine's breath caught. The ranch house was modest but solid, built of timber and stone with a wide porch and views of the mountains. Barns and corrals spread out behind it, and cattle dotted the distant hillsides. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's rough," Lucas said honestly. "The house needs work. The fences need mending. There's always something breaking or wearing out. It's perfect." The foreman, a weathered man named Jack, came out to greet them, his eyes widening when he saw Catherine. "Boss, you actually found her." "I did. Jack, this is my wife, Catherine. Catherine, Jack's been keeping this place running while I've been gone. Catherine shook Jack's hand firmly. Thank you for taking care of things. I'm looking forward to learning how I can help. Jack's respect was immediate and obvious. Welcome home, Mrs. Reed. The first months of their marriage were an adjustment. Catherine had never run a household, never cooked over a wood stove or preserved vegetables or managed ranch accounts. But she learned quickly, throwing herself into the work with enthusiasm. She helped Jack with the books, bringing order to accounting that had been haphazard at best. She worked alongside Lucas mending fences, feeding livestock, and doing the 100 daily tasks that kept a ranch functioning. The trust fund from her mother paid off the most pressing debts and gave them breathing room to make improvements. Catherine insisted on being involved in every financial decision, learning about cattle prices and market trends, becoming a true partner in every sense. The community was initially skeptical of the refined Eastern woman who'd married their struggling rancher, but Catherine won them over with her work ethic and genuine interest in ranch life. She helped neighboring women with difficult births, both human and animal. She organized a small school for the ranch children in the area, teaching reading and arithmetic in the evenings. She learned to ride astride, just like the rancher's wife she'd envied in her diary, and Lucas would often see her galloping across the meadows with obvious joy. Their love deepened through shared work and shared dreams. They talked about everything, argued occasionally, and always found their way back to each other. Lucas marveled daily at the gift of having a true partner, someone who understood his dreams and contributed her own. The ranch began to thrive under their joint management. With the debt paid down and careful reinvestment, they expanded the herd and improved the grazing lands. Word spread about the quality of Reed cattle, and their prices at market reflected that reputation. A year after their wedding, on a night when summer storms rolled across the mountains, Catherine made an announcement: "I'm pregnant." Lucas had been reading a livestock journal but dropped it immediately. "Are you sure?" The doctor confirmed it today when I was in town. "We're going to have a baby." He pulled her into his arms, overcome with emotion. "Are you happy about it?" "Terrified and happy," she said, echoing the words she'd spoken when choosing to stay with him. "This wasn't planned, but yes, I'm happy. You're going to be an amazing mother." "I hope so. I keep thinking about my own mother, wishing she was here to guide me. She'd be proud of you. Look at everything you've accomplished, everything you've built." Catherine's pregnancy was relatively easy, and she continued working alongside Lucas until the final weeks. The community women rallied around her, sharing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, welcoming her fully into their circle. On a cold February morning in 1885, Catherine gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him James, after Lucas's father, with Charles as a middle name, Catherine's way of honoring her own father despite their estrangement. Holding his son for the first time, Lucas felt his world shift and expand. "He's perfect." "He looks like you," Catherine said, exhausted but glowing. "He has your eyes." They spent the first weeks of parenthood in a sleepless haze of feeding and changing and marveling at the tiny human they'd created. Lucas had never imagined himself as a father, but he took to it naturally, walking the floor with James when he cried, changing diapers without complaint, supporting Catherine as she navigated the challenges of nursing. When James was 3 months old, Catherine made a decision. "I want to write to my father, tell him about his grandson." "Are you sure? He was pretty clear about cutting you off." "I know. But he's had over a year to think about it, and maybe becoming a grandfather will soften him. I have to try, Lucas. I have to believe there's still a chance for reconciliation." Lucas supported her, though privately he doubted Zimmerman would respond. Catherine wrote a long, heartfelt letter describing their life, the ranch, their son. She included a photograph they'd had taken in town, the three of them looking like the family they'd become. She sent the letter to the last address she had for her father in Sacramento and waited. Weeks passed with no response. Catherine tried not to show her disappointment, but Lucas could see it in the way she'd linger at the mailbox, hoping. Then, 2 months after sending her letter, a response finally came. Not from Charles Zimmerman, but from a lawyer handling his estate. Charles had died of a heart attack 6 weeks earlier. He'd left Catherine nothing in his will, but the lawyer felt obliged to inform her of his death. Catherine took the news hard, grieving not just for the loss of her father, but for the reconciliation that would now never happen. Lucas held her while she cried, taking over care of James so she could process her emotions. "I waited too long," she said one night. "I should have written sooner. Maybe if I'd reached out earlier we could have made peace." "You couldn't have known," Lucas said gently. "And you did reach out. You tried. That's all anyone can do. He died thinking I didn't love him. He died knowing you loved yourself enough to choose your own path. That takes a kind of strength he might not have understood, but it's valuable nonetheless." Slowly, Catherine worked through her grief. She threw herself into ranch work and motherhood, into building the life she'd chosen. And gradually, the sharp pain of loss faded to a gentler ache, a permanent reminder of the complicated man who'd been her father. The years rolled by in a blur of seasons and celebrations, challenges and triumphs. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful in the Helena area. Catherine's business acumen combined with Lucas's ranching knowledge proved an unbeatable combination. When James was 2, Catherine gave birth to a daughter they named Eleanor, after her mother. 2 years after that, another son arrived, Samuel. Their house filled with noise and laughter, with muddy boots and scraped knees, with bedtime stories and family dinners around a table that seemed to always need expanding. Catherine never stopped writing. She filled journal after journal with observations about ranch life, motherhood, the changing Montana landscape. And sometimes, late at night when the children were asleep, Lucas would catch her reading that original diary, the one he'd found blown open on the trail all those years ago. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked one such night. "Giving up your father's world, the comfort and security you could have had?" Catherine looked up from the page, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. "Not for a single moment. I regret the pain it caused my father. I regret that we never reconciled. But the choice itself? Never. This life, this family, this partnership with you is everything I wanted and more than I ever dreamed possible. Even though it's hard work and rough living, especially because of that. I matter here, Lucas. I contribute. I'm not an ornament or a possession. I'm a rancher, a mother, a wife, a teacher, a community member. I'm real." Lucas crossed to her, tilting her face up for a kiss. "You've always been real. That's what I loved from the very first page." As their children grew, Catherine made sure they knew the story of how their parents met. James, in particular, loved hearing about the diary blown across the trail, about his father's year-long search, about his mother's courage in choosing her own path. "That's the most romantic story ever," Eleanor declared when she was 8. "Like something from a fairy tale." "It's better than a fairy tale," Catherine corrected gently, "because it's real. And because the happy ending wasn't guaranteed, we had to work for it, fight for it, choose it every single day." The ranch became a gathering place for the community, known for Catherine's generosity and Lucas's fairness. They employed local men and women, paid fair wages, and treated everyone with respect. During hard times, they extended credit to neighbors. During good times, they shared their success. When James turned 15, he began taking on more responsibilities around the ranch, showing a natural talent for livestock management. Alina, at 13, had her mother's head for numbers and began helping with the accounts. Samuel, the youngest at 11, was the dreamer, always wandering off to explore the mountains or sketch the landscape. "We've built something good here," Lucas said one evening, watching his children work together to bring the cattle in for the night. "We have," Catherine agreed, slipping her hand into his. "Better than good. We've built a legacy." "You think they understand how lucky they are to be able to choose their own paths?" "I make sure they do. I tell them about my father, about the expectations and limitations I faced. I want them to appreciate their freedom, but also to use it wisely." As the children grew into young adults, the question of the ranch's future became more pressing. James wanted to stay, to take over operations eventually. Alina wanted to study law, to advocate for other women who faced the limitations Catherine had escaped. Samuel wanted to be an artist, to capture the beauty of the West in paintings. "They should all follow their dreams," Catherine said firmly when she and Lucas discussed it. "James can run the ranch if that's what he truly wants, but Alina and Samuel should be free to pursue their own interests too." "The ranch can support all of them," Lucas agreed. "We've built it strong enough for that." On their 20th wedding anniversary, Lucas planned a surprise. He took Catherine back to the spot where he'd found her diary, a place they'd visited occasionally over the years but not recently. The trail looked much the same, though a proper road now ran nearby. Lucas dismounted and helped Catherine down, then pulled something from his saddlebag. "What's this?" she asked as he handed her a leather-bound book. "Open it." Inside, Catherine found page after page of entries in Lucas's handwriting. He'd kept his own diary for the past 20 years, documenting their life together, his love for her, his gratitude for the day he'd found her journal. "Lucas," she breathed, tears streaming down her face. "This is beautiful." "I wanted you to know that I see you," he said, echoing the words that had first captured her heart. "Every single day I see you, and I'm grateful beyond measure that you chose me, that you chose this life." She kissed him there on the trail, a kiss that held 20 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. "Best decision I ever made," she whispered against his lips. "Second best," he corrected. "The first was writing your thoughts in that diary so honestly that a stranger couldn't help but fall in love with them." They stood together as the sun set over the Montana mountains. Two people who'd found each other through chance and courage, who'd built a life that honored both tradition and transformation. The years continued their steady march. James married a local girl and took over day-to-day ranch operations, proving himself a capable and innovative manager. Alina earned her law degree, one of the first women in Montana to do so, and opened a practice in Helena helping women secure property rights and fair treatment. Samuel's paintings began selling in galleries back east, bringing recognition to the beauty of Montana landscapes. Catherine and Lucas gradually stepped back from ranch management, content to advise and support while enjoying more leisure time. They traveled occasionally, visiting places Catherine had written about in her diary. They hosted gatherings for their growing family as grandchildren began arriving. But their favorite times were still the quiet evenings, sitting on the porch they'd expanded over the years, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if I hadn't found your diary?" Lucas asked one such evening. Catherine considered the question. "Sometimes, I imagine I would have made it to California, been introduced to society, probably married someone appropriate, had a comfortable but empty life. You might have been happy." "I might have been content," she corrected. "But happiness, real joy, that I only found here with you. Lucas reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of decades together. "I almost didn't pick it up, the diary. I was in such a hurry to get to Helena, so focused on my own problems. I almost just rode past. But you didn't?" "No, something made me stop, made me look at that one page, changed everything." "Fate," Catherine suggested, "or just dumb luck. Does it matter which? I suppose not. The result is the same." When Catherine turned 60, the family threw a grand celebration at the ranch. All their children and grandchildren attended, along with half the community. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, stories told and retold about the diary and the cowboy, and the year-long search that had brought them together. Eleanor stood to give a toast. "To my mother, who taught me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and choosing to move forward anyway. Who showed me that a woman can be strong and soft, capable and vulnerable, traditional and revolutionary all at once. And to my father, who proved that real love means seeing someone fully and loving them not despite their truth but because of it." The applause was thunderous, and Catherine wiped away tears as Lucas kissed her cheek. "Our daughter inherited your way with words," he murmured. "And your sense of justice," Catherine replied. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Lucas and Catherine found themselves alone on the porch once more, the place where they'd had so many important conversations over the years. "It's been a good life," Catherine said softly. "The best," Lucas agreed. "No regrets, only one. I wish I'd found a way to reconcile with my father before he died, but even that regret doesn't diminish the joy of everything else. He would be proud of you, I think, if he could see what you've built, who you've become. Maybe. Or maybe he'd still think I should have chosen differently, but I've made peace with that uncertainty." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the wind carried the scent of sage and pine. "I love you," Lucas said, words he'd spoken thousands of times but which never lost their meaning. "I love you too," Catherine replied, words that still made her heart swell with emotion after all these years. Lucas and Catherine lived into their 80s, enjoying a long and healthy old age surrounded by family and the land they loved. They saw their grandchildren grow and marry, welcomed great-grandchildren into the world, and continued to be active in their community until their final years. When Lucas passed away peacefully in his sleep at 84, Catherine grieved deeply, but not desperately. They'd had over 60 years together, a lifetime of love and partnership that exceeded anything she'd imagined in those diary entries so long ago. She lived another 3 years without him, spending her time with family, writing her memoirs, and preserving the history of the ranch and the community they'd helped build. The original diary, now fragile with age, was kept in a place of honor in the family home, a reminder of the chance encounter that had changed so many lives. Catherine passed away on a summer morning, sitting in her favorite chair on the porch, looking out at the mountains she'd loved for over 60 years. James found her there, peaceful and smiling, a journal open in her lap. The last entry, written in her still elegant handwriting, reads simply, "I chose well. I chose love. I chose freedom, and I was blessed beyond measure." The ranch continued to thrive under James's management and eventually passed to his children and grandchildren. The diary was preserved and eventually donated to the Montana Historical Society, where it became part of an exhibit on women's lives in the frontier West. Scholars and visitors alike were moved by Catherine's honest reflections, and the romantic story of how those private words had led to a lifetime of love. Eleanor's legal practice, established precedents that helped generations of Montana women secure their rights and independence. Samuel's paintings hung in museums across the country, capturing the wild beauty of the landscape his parents had loved. And all their descendants carried forward the lessons Catherine and Lucas had modeled. That courage means choosing your own path, that love means seeing someone truly, and that the best legacy is a life lived with authenticity and purpose. In Helena, Montana, the Reed Ranch remained a landmark, its history preserved and honored. Tour guides would tell visitors about the diary blown open on the trail, about the cowboy who spent a year finding the woman who wrote it, about the love story that became legend. And on quiet summer evenings, when the wind blew just right across the Montana grasslands, locals swore they could feel the presence of Lucas and Catherine, still watching over the land they'd built together, still writing their love story in every sunset and sunrise, in every generation that chose courage over comfort, authenticity over expectation, love over fear. The diary itself, carefully preserved behind glass, remained open to that fateful page, the one Lucas had read first. I dream of someone who might see me as more than just Charles Zimmerman's daughter. Below it, the museum had mounted a quote from Lucas's own journal. I found more than a diary on that trail. I found my purpose, my partner, my home. I found Catherine, and in finding her, I found myself. Their story became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of honest words, brave choices, and the belief that sometimes the best adventures begin with a single moment of courage. It reminded people that love isn't always convenient or sensible, that the greatest risks often yield the greatest rewards, and that choosing yourself is never selfish when it leads you to becoming the best version of who you were meant to be. The Reed family legacy continued for generations, built on the foundation Lucas and Catherine had established. Hard work, honest dealing, respect for the land, and the belief that every person deserves the freedom to write their own story. They taught their descendants that heritage matters but doesn't have to be destiny, that tradition and innovation can coexist, and that the greatest inheritance is not wealth or property, but the example of a life well lived. In the end, Catherine had gotten everything she'd written about in her diary and more than she'd dared to dream. She'd found mountains and honest work, purpose and partnership, freedom and belonging. She'd mattered in countless ways to her family, her community, her state. And she'd been seen, truly seen, first by a cowboy who found her diary on a dusty trail, and then by everyone whose life she touched. Lucas had found more than a wife when he made the impractical decision to chase a woman he'd never met across 2 territories. He'd found the missing piece of himself, the partner who made his struggles meaningful and his triumphs sweeter. He discovered that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is admit he needs someone, that vulnerability is strength, and that the best adventures are the ones you never planned. Together, they'd built not just a successful ranch but a legacy of love, courage, and authenticity that rippled out through their children, their community, and eventually into history itself. They proved that one moment of bravery, one honest word, one person willing to truly see another, can change not just 2 lives but countless others. And it all began with a diary blown open on a trail, pages fluttering in the Montana wind, waiting for someone brave enough to read, to understand, and to spend a year finding the woman who'd written those honest, hopeful words. A cowboy named Lucas Reed took that chance, made that choice, and in doing so wrote a love story for the ages.